Morning again, Grace Church family. So good to be with you again as we continue with our daily devotionals. I'm so thankful for the staff being able to do these devotionals each day. I hope you had a great weekend. It was the Labor Day weekend. Hard to believe that we're in September and fall is on us in a sense. Schools are starting up again in some areas. Here at the church, NDCA, the Christian school that meets in our church, has their first day back to school after being away for so long. And so it's an exciting day and yet daunting in some respects as the teachers and the students try to work out all these protocols for this coronavirus pandemic we're in and trying to just follow all the guidelines that the government has set in place. So please pray for schools and for NDCA here at Grace Church, especially as it's kind of going to be a tense time, I'm sure, over the next number of weeks as things get settled in here. Over the past few weeks for my devotionals, I've been doing this little mini series on the temptations of Jesus in Matthew chapter 4. And so I want to kind of finish that off today as we look at the final temptation of Jesus. Remember, we saw that, in a sense, a common theme through these temptations for us to learn from is that in each one of these temptations, Satan tried to have Jesus distracted from the mission God had called him to. And so for us, how often does Satan try to distract us from our call to serve God and be obedient to his word? So let me just read this final temptation in Matthew chapter 4, and I'm going to start here at verse 8. Again, the devil took him, that's Jesus, to the very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, all these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Then Jesus said to him, begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and were ministering to him. So in this final temptation of Jesus, Satan takes Jesus to a very high mountaintop and shows him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. Kind of hard to picture what that was like. I'm sure it was in a vision of some sort. But here, Satan wants to, in a sense, offer Jesus an opportunity to take control and rule over all the kingdoms of the world. Now, one question that always comes up in any discussion on this passage is, did Satan really actually have the power and authority to be able to offer those kingdoms to Jesus? Well, in some way he did. The Bible's clear. It describes Satan in Ephesians 2 as the prince of the power of the air. And later or earlier in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, Paul describes Satan as the god of this world. He's free to roam the earth and deceive people. And he's like, as 1 Peter 5:8 says, he's like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. And so ultimately, of course, God is in control, the final authority, and basically doesn't allow anything to happen without his will. But when sin entered the world, in a sense, the door was open for Satan to wield his evil influence on the earth and to get people, to try to get people to turn away from God. And so, in that sense, he had the opportunity to show these kingdoms to Jesus and say, hey, Jesus, if you will just worship me, then I'll kind of let go of control and give it all to you. You see, the problem here is that Satan was trying to give Jesus rule over kingdoms without going through the cross. He was tempting Jesus to kind of take power for himself, the influence over all of the world, and bypass God's plan of redemption for mankind. See, ultimately, God was going to give Jesus all the kingdoms of the world anyway. That was God's promise to Jesus, but it had to be done through God's plan. And that plan included Jesus going to the cross and dying to pay the penalty for your sin and for mine. And so there's a couple of applications in this passage for us. Um, how often, first of all, how often do we get tempted to seek glory and power or influence through our own means, our own strengths, our gifts and abilities, and we leave God out of the picture? We manipulate people, we manipulate circumstances to get our own way and fail to be seeking God first and allowing Him and His Spirit to guide us and direct us. Or we fail to be patient and wait for God's timing in things. We rush in and take control ourselves. And so that's one way in which we are tempted in this way that Satan was trying to tempt Jesus, to bypass God and take control and influence for ourselves in our own way. Another application is how often do we get tempted by the luxuries and the indulgences of the world that we live in and begin to replace God with things that, in a sense, draw our own worship, if you will. You see, Satan tempts us with so many things, so many ways that take our focus off of God. And in a sense, we create our own gods, gods like money or entertainment or sports or possessions or whatever it is that we begin to, in a sense, worship by basically drawing all of our energy and attention away from God to these other things. Now, Satan, of course, Satan doesn't win out. Jesus rebukes Satan and says, "Be gone, Satan." And then he reminds Satan that God is the only one to be worshiped. He alone is the only one who deserves our praise and honor and glory and worship, and only Him should be served. And maybe that's a good challenge for us as we move into, in a sense, this fall ministry season where we're hoping to launch some ministries here at Grace, or as you're busy at home and your kids are starting to get ready to go back to school again. It's a busy time of life again here in this month of September. But maybe this is a time for us to just pause and refocus our attention on worshiping God. It's a good time for us to be purging our lives, if you will, of things that have been so distracting to us, that have taken our attention away from God and even our worship. And so let's get our attention back on worshiping the only true God, the only one who deserves all of our praise and honor. In a sense, it's like what Paul says in Colossians. In Colossians chapter 3, verse 1 and 2, he says this. Let me just turn here for a minute. Colossians chapter 3, verse 1 and 2 says, "If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things that are above, not on things that are on the earth." And so may that be our challenge as we head into this new season of life in September again. Jesus was tempted in every way, just like we are. And in a sense, so he gives us then his spirit to help us to overcome these temptations. And so draw on that. Pray to God that his spirit would give us wisdom and discernment to resist temptation and seek to honor and glorify God. Let me end again with this passage in Hebrews chapter 4, where we're reminded of the fact that Jesus was tempted in every way like we are, but without sin. And so it says here in Hebrews chapter 4, starting at verse 14, "Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who is in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence, draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." So let's resist Satan. and come to God's throne of grace, seeking His help to discern His word and His will for our life, and then respond with obedience. So I hope that challenges you this week as we kind of end this little mini devotional series. So God's blessing to you, and whatever lays ahead for you in this month of September, whether it's sending kids to school or just praying for your grandkids who are starting school up, or whatever other opportunities are opened up now in September for you, pray God's blessing on you, that you would seek His will in all these things. All right, we'll see you again next time. Bye for now.